Hello, I'm Helene Oberman, Managing Director of Interior Design Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to today's conversation about Star on the Rise. With a passion for creating the complex from the simple and fashioning anything and everything from a brand's marketing message to her own unique hairstyles, this designer has a style all her own. Whether it's collaborating with her studio at Gensler on the environmental graphics for a new workplace or choreographing her next great dance performance, Fitgi Saint-Louis knows how to design with meaning, and she does it all to her very own tune. Hello, Fitgi, and welcome. Thank you so much for being on today. Well, first off, I want to say congratulations, because you are actually here today because you won a Rising Star Award for our recent HIP Awards. And this was really all for your recognition for your great work that you're doing as an environmental graphic designer at Gensler. So how was that experience for you? Were you watching from home?
So I was actually in Home Depot, and then I had family and friends hitting me up. It was just really amazing to be recognized by the community and the industry as an environmental graphic designer in the workplace category. So for me, that was a really big moment. It felt very validating and just kind of welcoming. So I was very excited to hear about it.
So you began your career 10 years ago as an intern at Gensler, and today you're a design lead, an associate, and environmental graphic designer at the firm's New York office. I'd love to hear about how your role sort of developed and really changed over the last 10 years.
Yeah, so as an intern, you're there, you're a sponge, you're trying to take all in this information, you're understanding process and work styles. And I think slowly but surely I understood the way that the project and the studio work together. And I tried to just inch my way into more spaces where I could just volunteer for either leadership or kind of giving different suggestions. I think you're supported by your team, so that was always great. And then that just turned into a full-time designer. That was like pretty seamless. And then it just kept kind of pushing between culture and design within the office and the studio. And then that's where I am now as a design lead. So it's really kind of managing from head to toe.
Well, it's been interesting to see, even just from like an editor's perspective, sort of the rise for both design firms and really your clients who've really come to understand the power of environmental graphics and projects. And I mean, how have you seen the growth in this practice?
Yeah, I would say there has been this large curve of appreciation and kind of just support for it. Understanding that it really does change the environment for your employees, your staff, your people, your consumers. And over time, just our reach and our kind of collaboration with our interior and architecture teams just became way more integrated, a lot more seamless, and the clients are really looking for it, something that they want as a storytelling device.
So speaking of storytelling, I know you really have this mission to create meaning in everything that you're doing. And really, how do you sort of create and capture that in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I would say the biggest part is really designing with your client or your partner and the end users to understand who they are. Because as designers, we want to kind of make the best and greatest and shiniest, but you really need to understand as a user what they need. And if it's about sharing culture, then we need to look at those different solutions. So I would say it's really just about what the people need for that space, and then using that as your starting point to then use your design sensibility to change and uplift.
So I'm curious about your design process and using maybe one of your most recent projects, the SANDOW offices here in New York. So can you tell us and sort of walk through, what it's like, starting with the client, and then how do you really develop a project?
Yeah, so with the SANDOW project, it was really great because it was also a younger client to have. And so they were able to kind of collaborate in new and easy ways. So I think when we all came to the table, it's also a new brand. So it's also a challenge when you have a new brand. What does that look like in the space? That's something that we typically are really easy, or we're able to help out with. So with them, we were understanding this new brand that was SANDOW, based in one piece, but kind of coming together of different forms. It was about a workshop. It was about creativity. It was about this spark, this innovation, but it also had a class or a way of it that we wanted to infuse into the space. And so we would always just share imagery, share color palettes. And that was together with our interior team and the architecture team. Together, all four of us, I would say, client plus the design side, we worked on what that kind of narrative was. And that led all of us through our design decisions. And throughout the process, it was even, as we went through the building, it was, how is this floor? What can we change and evolve on the next floor and the next floor? So it was always an evolving practice where it never stopped at one point. It was like, okay, pencils down. It was always just kind of really natural and organic for us.
So I'm just curious because you touched on it. So the work that you're doing is really collaborative because it doesn't just start and stop with environmental graphics or interior design or architecture or just the client itself. Like you really do have to work as one team together in order to work on a project.
Yeah, I think that makes such a difference because if you leave the client out, then you're bringing them in at different parts of the project where then when they do have input, you might have to work backwards if necessary. So really just creating that frontline base as we are this unified team, I think that helps out so much. And even with the interior team, with our digital team, when we looked at the floor plate and the space, the journey that we wanted people to have, it was really important for us to look at volume, to look at space, to look at scale together. And that's where all pieces feel like they fit in the right areas.
And I'm just curious because you said, Xander, you're almost starting from scratch. How does that differ from working with a client who has a very established message?
Yeah, when you're starting with someone who doesn't really have, I guess, the foundation of what the space should or typically has looked like, it allows you to really create anything. It's really an experimental process. You might get some things right, you might get some things wrong, but overall, we're all looking towards the ideal space that they would like and designing towards that versus if you already have maybe a package of what is typically done in a space or a more established or larger client, then sometimes you're working within the lines of that and then together with your particular client trying to find ways to make it unique for that area.
You're also a mentor and really highly involved in Gensler's internal culture. Can you tell me about some of the programming you work on at the firm?
Yeah, there's a lot. I do try to fill up all the time that I have in between project work. There's a lot of reach out groups that we have. So Right to Dream is one of them. We do an annual fundraiser with the team. That's with our Boston Properties partners and with a lot of different other design collaborators. But usually what motivates me is kind of the end result or who it's really benefiting. So for that initiative, it's students who are from Ghana. They study in America, and they're looking at different universities, bringing their talents, not only on the soccer field, but within the classroom to just develop and become really great professionals and then to uplift their country. So we help with their design of their event. Internally in the office, this was the first year that the New York and kind of Northeast region did a Black History Month programming. And that stemmed from my first trip to the NOMA conference, which I hadn't been to before. My sister is also an architect, so she was like, you gotta go. So I went, and it was really this empowering moment of trying to elevate and uplift Black voices within the industry. And so within our office, the way that I saw that was through conversations, through exhibitions, and through kind of these fun celebratory movements that we could have, but also these discussions that could be held and had together.
It just seems very obviously of the moment, having those kind of conversations. And do you find yourself and obviously both Gensler more activated to have these conversations around diversity within the studio and obviously outside and some more of these sort of organizations you're working with like NOMA and Right to Dream?
It's just necessary. I think we're at a point where the conversation had been had in smaller doses, but now there's an active front supporting and targeting ways to change it. So I think, yeah, it's where we are and it's what everyone has to jump on board with.
And I mean, I'm curious to know who was your mentor or mentors on this path to design?
Yeah, I would say my sister Pascal's the eldest. She had been kind of the one to start the design front within our family. Our parents were always really interested in the arts, but from her being able to see her go through school and study architecture, I think that was a large, just eye-opening experience for different career paths that are available. Within the office, I have so many different mentors from design directors and principals who are always just there to lend a hand. And I would take all my ideas, no matter how big or small, to everyone. And they'll see how we can kind of work on that. So that's been supportive. I would also say Faith Rose at Human Scale has just like picked me out at events and said, let's talk, let's collaborate, let's see what we can do for each other, for the industry. And I think that's really important to have mentors of all different types, but especially another Black woman is fantastic.
Mhm. No, and I mean, it's a powerful thing to have. I'm curious because you said your sister obviously led you or sort of opened the door
Yeah.
to the path of design, but what really was the journey like? I mean, did you start early on as a creative?
Yeah, because my parents, they came from Haiti and their interests were always in the arts, although their careers were in medicine. So we kind of grew up in fabric stores, art stores, and we're surrounded by that. But then in high school, when I had seen that I already wanted to do more of a creative career, there was a program where I spent half the day, probably my junior and senior year, learning different computer programs, learning drawing and sketching and painting. And that started a foundation of what you could bring that to another level. So then I applied to really SVA was like my only choice that I wanted to stick with. And then I went there for 4 years for design.
That's amazing. And then how did you kind of go, aha, or what was the aha moment for something like environmental graphics?
That is an interesting one because as design programs, you're taught a lot at the same time. There's the heavy hitters that at the moment, editorial, you have people who are studying motion. But for me, I always think and develop ideas within forms. So whether it's sculptural or larger scale. So I was trying to find something that was along the lines of that. And I had an instructor that was in environmental graphics design. And that's how I was able to see that as a larger career path. Yeah.
Are there any sort of environmental graphic designers that you sort of idolize?
I'm really trying to find my own path that's a little bit of a mix of art plus design and space. I think there are studios out there that I appreciate their work, but I can't think of a person in particular. It's really just approach to me, like how does someone look at a project? What are they really trying to change? I appreciate people who also look at things from different angles and not typically the same style. But I would say I'm trying to find my own way and my own voice. Yeah.
I mean, you've also always been a creative because you've had another outlet with dance. I mean, what was really the spark that drove you to dance?
So dance, I've been doing a long time, probably since I was 6. So that was just like, hey, my mom asking, you want to take dance class with your friend in kindergarten? I'm like, sure. And then realizing that I had an affinity just for movement and then storytelling in that way. Performing, I can be on any stage. I'll turn a conference room into a stage if necessary. And I did that throughout all of my schooling. And it was a way also that I learned to time manage myself between work that you had in the day at school and then dancing at night or afternoons. And then in college, that's where I was also kind of going back and forth. I've really never given it up. It's been a part of who I am and a voice that I have that is not vocal, but it's a core and a spirit anchor for myself that I really love. Yeah.
I mean, it's great that you have that other outlet in a way. So you know, between the graphics and obviously dance. I mean, do you find that there's great parallels between the two?
Always, I think form, shapes, even color between costumes, all of those different aspects that are both part of design and dance and performing arts, they are very parallel. I think everything I've learned from all those years of dancing was able to translate into the way that I design, but also design and the process of that has informed the way that I also do performing and dancing. I think, yeah, it's really about the essence of that story, but the elements are so similar.
So obviously you have a passion and a love for just creativity, but it doesn't start or stop with graphics or design. Because you also have a passion project that you call Give Them Hair. How long has that been going on for now?
So that's, a hair journey for myself probably started in junior year of school, where growing up, I always had treatments, chemical treatments to make my hair straighter. So it was easier for my mom or myself to manage. And when you get to college, you kind of have this awakening moment where, what if I left my texture as is? And so over time, I would pretty much have it in a bun. That was fine. and slowly just started to play around with form again, looking at it through hair though as a way of expressing myself. And that was probably 2016 or 2014 even, and still pretty much doing it every day, where every day is an opportunity to try a different style, to really express the different, I would say, the flexibility and options that you have with natural hair, and celebrating that what it is.
Yeah. I mean, girls with curls, right?
Yeah.
We got to stick together.
Yeah.
I know you're still quite young in your career and really have a great future ahead of you, rising star. But I'm just curious, I mean, what kind of challenges or setbacks have you had to overcome, whether it's your professional or personal life, to kind of take you to where you are now?
I would say in school, as a student, you're trying to look at what is out there and who can you lean on. And I think not seeing many Black designers around made you question where you would fit in the industry. But having people like my sister around just made a place of, we will make our space. We will find a space, we will create it. And then when you are now a designer and you found your area, it's also for you to, I would say for myself, trusting that I knew what I was doing and that my skill and my talent was valid. I think sometimes you question your abilities as a designer and you have these self-doubt moments. So that was always something in the beginning of, I know what great work looks like and I'm not sure I'm there yet, but you just have to trust in that process and take in as much as you can. And over time, I've been able to really own my own style and my eye for design as who I am, and not trying to emulate. Yeah.
So I'm curious, obviously, given the current state of the world between obviously the global pandemic and a lot of social inequality, are you really looking to change the approach of both your work inside and outside of the office?
Definitely. For inside the office, I think we just really need to start focusing more on the day-to-day person, like really putting that person in the room. Typically, we work a lot with clients at a certain level that we're working with, but what happens if we start bringing more staff into our process throughout the progress? I think within the office, increasing our diversity amounts, especially Black designers, is huge. Different than my day-to-day work, but then outside the office for myself, I think I've been trying to align with and support a lot of these groups that are really working to push the envelope within the design industry. So most recently with Design as Protest, working with them and trying to support through the graphic design skills and kind of planning opportunities that I have to help out.
Yeah. And I'm curious also during this time period, because you are such a creative and you have so many different outlets, I mean, have you been inspired to do any more personal projects besides the dance or obviously give them hair?
Always, I have a running list of personal projects, whether they're more personal or socially related, that I've yet to get to in a hot minute. But I did and do have this paper series of armor forms that I've created, because my sculpture with paper is something that I really love working with, the material. And they've always been these armor forms that are proud women. And I think that's kind of something that we're finding people at battle with something right now, and trying to kind of fight against what has been wrong or what has been pushed aside. So that paper series, I would love to continue further now, because I had done it a couple years ago, and I'd love to see where my thought process takes that further.
And I mean, are these armors things that you're just creating yourself, or are you sort of looking back at sort of historical materials for inspiration?
It's a little bit of both, with looking at older forms and masks from different African cultures, but also I was inspired by, I had done a trip to Thailand, and the architecture there I thought was really beautiful in its layering, and what would that mean to mix these different cultures. But also I have this futuristic or Afrofuturistic end to things, where what would this person or this ancient fighter look like in the future? And I try to kind of take that sensibility and tie it in. So it's been an interesting mix of past and present influences that I've been mixing together. Yeah.
And I'm actually curious though, what is it about paper that's such a draw to use that sort of as your medium and material to work in?
With paper, you're able to do so much with it. And I've found that I've not only kind of trimmed and cut, scored it, but also woven it. I've turned it into circles. I think because I'm able to create new forms with it and give it new life, it's been able to almost turn into fabric. So it's like an interesting way to turn one material into another. And I've just always loved the way that you can also change the color, the weight of it can have different structure. And honestly, it's really accessible and anyone could use it. So I like the idea that something that's available to all people could be turned into something that's really amazing.
So sort of circling back from the personal to the more professional, are you finding, just because of COVID and things that are happening more on the pandemic side, is your approach with your brand studio different for some of the projects that you have coming up?
So we've just been collaborating more, I would say, with virtual programs, kind of checking in. We start our day off. I'm leading everyone with a little wellness stretch because we're not physically active as much. So getting our bodies ready for the day. But we have been using a lot of different, I would say, collaborative programs that are able for us to be in one document at one time, to start creating mood boards. So our process, we've tried to integrate it and become even more seamless as a team so that we're not wasting time kind of doing things siloed and then bringing it to the table and seeing where in the process possible can we do things together as much as possible.
And then in this sort of new normal workplace, are you going to find things like wayfinding and zoning really important to the work that you're doing?
100%, with especially trying to guide people through spaces and helping them find their way without a voice that's didactic and saying like this way, that way. We tried to find a tone that is really conversational and human to put within these new spaces. I think the tone of voice is going to continue to grow and evolve. That's more approachable. And we did that with our COVID signage set that we had created for a lot of re-entry to office projects.
Because obviously you have it for Gensler and your myriad of offices, and then carrying that over to some of your clients, correct?
Yes. Yeah, really just offering that to everyone.
And then is there a project that you're working on right now that you can kind of give us a sneak peek to?
So right now I'm excited. We're working on a workplace project for a music brand. And what I love about that, as a dancer and as a creative, is the experiences of music that we can bring into the workplace through small different activations. And what I'm excited about for that space is the materiality is pretty raw. It's very industrial, and we're trying to find a way to really bring that music and studio voice of the content and the people, the energy of both brands into the space that works together. So I'm excited for that.
How are you trying to capture that feeling so that you can translate it to this project?
Yeah, I think when you take on new brands, and what I love is you end up doing a deep dive into who they are, the history of that, whether it's an activity or a brand. So for music, we went back and thought, okay, what are these music experiences that we each have had as individuals, but also in small and then large groups? What are things we can pull from concerts, or when you did go to record stores, or when you played a cassette? What were those different, I would say, nostalgic?
But you still have to like pull from a history, I think, in order to move forward. You have to know what was behind you before you can look ahead, if you think about it.
Yeah. I think what they're most excited about is the future of music, and because it's all digital, what could that mean for brands, music brands, record labels, and artists to connect with the fans? So we're trying to think of everything on a fan level and also an artist. So with your artists, when they have their pen and paper, what is that materiality like? What are different graphic styles we can pull from the art of making music? And then as a fan, we're thinking about what are the ways that you are most excited to, have these relationships with your artist that you favor, or when you're at a concert, what is that kind of sensibility and the visual things over time, both past and present, that we can bring into the space, from posters to stickers on crates. I think we're thinking about all those graphic moments, but also how it made you feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really curious because obviously you're so passionate about everything that you do, and you had some great mentors between your sister and obviously the brand studio leaders at Gensler. I would like to find out what you, Fitgi, have to say to the sort of the next generation of designers who are looking for inspiration.
For inspiration, that's a good question. I would say for the next gen, when you're looking to see what you can really add to spaces, it's thinking about the people first and understanding, having those conversations, seeing what is around that you could really add to it with the skills and tools that you know, but then to always keep your eyes open to everything between, for me, I love looking at inspiration in nature, architecture of different countries. I think textiles are beautiful spaces. Finding the beauty in anything, finding elements of different aspects of your life or your day that you can pull into your work. So being inspired to make meaningful change, I think would be probably my biggest note, that if you're able to center and put people first, then the work is always going to benefit them the most. And you're just able to bring in your references of beauty and color into that. But just don't be afraid to make things for people.
Yeah, I mean, nobody should be afraid. I mean, there's a lot of power in design.
For the next gen also, I think right now too, we're seeing the power of design, both on social media channels, in environmental graphics that are being placed around the country. I think you're able to see the impact of when the message behind your work is really impactful, how that's going to be received, and that it can inspire, it can inject hope, it can really make a difference. So
It's all about making a difference. Well, Fitgi, I know that you're making a difference, and I think it was really inspirational, and really appreciate, you sharing your story here today. Congratulations on winning a Rising Star Award,
thank
and
you.
being here. So thank you, really appreciate it.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Hi, it's Kate Abney, Homes Editor for the Southeast edition of Luxe, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Charlotte Lucas, Principal of Charlotte Lucas Interior Design, to our DesignTV programming today. If you don't know Charlotte, I am so glad to introduce you. Based in Charlotte, North Carolina, she's a master at mixing disparate patterns in the most genius way, creating a sense of harmony rather than cacophony. She puts a fresh spin on the Queen City's traditional Southern roots with bold color, whimsy, and her clients' own treasured heirlooms. We are so thrilled to feature one of her fabulous projects in the cover of Luxe Southeast January-February issue. It's a really special residence, and I can't wait for us to learn more about it. First, Charlotte, how are things going for you in the Queen City? How is sheltering in place with Brooks and the little ones going?
Thank you, Kate. I'm so excited to be here, and it's so good to see your face, even if it's virtually. We are doing well. We are very fortunate to be blessed with wonderful weather. So we've been doing a lot of activities outside, and we planted our garden recently with the kiddos, and we've been doing some at-home tie-dye with the little ones as well. So that's been really fun to kind of stay busy and stay creative.
That sounds amazing. What are you planting in the garden?
We plant a vegetable garden every year with my kids, an herb garden. So this year I let the kids choose what they wanted to plant. So we have strawberries, tomatoes, and I had jalapenos to do some cocktails with.
Jalapeno margarita is my favorite.
Yes. Yeah.
So the owners of the house in question are a sweet family with young children too. And they found an amazing house in Myers Park, but it needed a little bit of TLC, didn't it?
It needed a lot of TLC. That would be an understatement. They were very fortunate to find such a gorgeous house, and part of the charm of the house, not only the interior architecture, was also the lot size. So it sits on a double lot in Myers Park, which is really hard to find. And with two young boys, they have a wonderful backyard for playing and exploring. And so it's been wonderful for them to have.
That's great. And you worked with Frank Smith, residential designer, and Phil Goodwin, the general contractor, to transform the house. Did you bring Frank and Phil to the project, or did you join later? How did you get to know these homeowners and come on board to the project?
The homeowners have been good friends of mine for a while. So I was thrilled when they called me to help them with their house. They had already hired Phil and Frank as a part of their team. So we all kind of came into the project together, and it really was a dream to work with Frank and with Phil from the very beginning. A lot of times we're not as lucky to do that, and it was wonderful to kind of all be in the process from the plans in the very beginning. Everyone brings a different point of view and a different expertise, and so it was wonderful to sit in on those early meetings.
Right. And, this is the second project we've published in Southeast where Frank Smith did the architecture. And I just love, he has this amazing genius brain. He just knows how to transform a house, but also honor it. And I feel like this house, with its 1940s architecture, pre-renovation, it was very quintessentially Myers Park, right?
It was very, very much so. Mm-hmm.
But you made an addition that was basically the size of the house. You essentially doubled the footprint, but made it more modern on the interior.
From the very beginning, or the constant consideration, I guess, would be, we really didn't want there to be a point of the house where you say, okay, I just left the original house and I'm entering into the new house. And that was the struggle that we went back and forth with. There's so much wonderful charm in the original part of the house that we loved, and we kept exactly as it was. But we realized once we flushed through some of the plans, we didn't necessarily need to match the addition of the house. We thought, this is and will always be an addition. And there's nothing wrong with modernizing that portion of the house and still honoring the exterior of what the house should look like architecturally. We did keep the hardwood floors consistent throughout, and that helped the transition, but we really wanted to modernize the windows and the doors in the back of the house. So that was something that we all agreed on, and it really made a big difference because it brought the backyard that's so wonderful and gorgeous and expansive into the house. It was great.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to talk to you more about that as we sort of go through the project. But just to sort of get started, once we go inside, we see your magic even more so on the interiors. And I think what's so special about this house is that both the husband and the wife have ties to the furniture and textile industries in nearby Hickory, right? So you were able to sort of incorporate some of their favorite pieces.
They do. They both have ties. They both grew up in Hickory, North Carolina. And so they're both very educated on the textile business and the furniture industry, which is wonderful and a dream for me. They both were very involved, which is great, and share a very classic taste with a modern twist. So it was really fun to explore that with a young family in this house.
And in this house, I noticed that you sort of keep going back to a few cornerstone brands that were some of their favorites. But I loved that these were already some that are some of your favorites, ones that you go back to again and again. So was it natural to sort of pull from a few of those brands? And please tell us some of those major manufacturers.
Absolutely. So the manufacturers that we used that they had ties to were Century Furniture, which is one of my favorites anyway, and their sister brand, which is Highland House. So we are constantly using their product, and was so thrilled. It's a dream to say, we'd love to use Century and Highland House, and on top of that, you get to customize it any way you want. So that was really, really interesting and really fun to do. So we went up to Hickory and looked at the factory, and then also they have ties to Valdez Weavers, which is a fabric manufacturer here in North Carolina as well. So we were able to customize some fabrics through them, which was great. and we went and toured their facilities and saw how everything was made. So it was a really neat educational process along the way.
That's great. And when you're in the, when you sort of enter the foyer, the entryway of this home, you see this amazing moment that is so sort of quintessentially Southern, this grand foyer. But you've also done some amazing updates in here. So can you tell me about the concept for that space?
So the updates, we really didn't do a lot of updates structurally. The beautiful staircase was there, which we just adored. We did, I think probably the biggest change was when you walked into this house, there was green shag carpet throughout the foyer, which was quite a statement. I don't know when that was originally put in, but we all agreed that needed to go. So that was the first thing out. We put hardwood floors that matched the existing in the foyer. And then just really updated the walls and the stair runner going up the stairs. So we kept it really simple. We didn't want to clutter this space up. We put a beautiful antique center table with a simple fire red engine lantern from Urban Electric. That's actually a double light. So there's one up at the foyer, or one up at the landing, and then one that falls down in the foyer. We added the animal print rug going up the stairs with a little bit of red trim, and then really decided the wallpaper was going to be the big standout. That was a big push for the clients. It was very much out of their comfort zone, and but really, after we pushed them and we did some rendering so they could understand exactly what it might look like, they were on board, and it's the most exciting thing when you walk in that house. So we're all really happy we were able to do that.
I think so too. I mean, that choice of wall covering makes all the difference. It's such a special and modern space. It sort of is both. And the general contractor, Phil Goodwin, also rebuilt the original staircase, just more of a restoration of the staircase, right?
More of a restoration. So we kept the original integrity of it and just restored everything to where it should be.
Great. And then in the formal living room, which is such another magnificent space, I love that the first thing we see is this amazing century writing desk. The work from home situation, this looks like a very attractive place to work from home right now. I love it.
It's a beautiful room, and it brings in so much natural light, which is wonderful. The clients with their ties to Century, it's interesting, they have a lot of really beautiful original Century pieces that are, probably 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. And then we've mixed them in with some new pieces as well. So it's really fun to see the evolution of Century furniture and the mixing of them in this house where you wouldn't necessarily all think that it came from one place.
Absolutely. It's such a wonderful mix, and with the colors and the textures. And speaking of color, everyone is talking about this silk draperies and this very particular color. How did you choose this hue?
It's definitely a bold statement, but we wanted something bold in this room. We loved the wall covering that we decided to use in this room, and we chose kind of this poppy coral color because of the little flowers in the wallpaper. So if you look closely, there's little flowers in the wallpaper that have that color. So we just accentuated it and brought it out. And it really was a beautiful, happy, bold statement as soon as you walked into that room.
Right. And what's so interesting about this wall covering, and it is, if you look on the website, it seems so much more muted, and you've just shown your magic as a designer by the way you've pulled the colors out. And you see that in other parts of the room as well, where you have these beautiful pillows and these jewel tones and the cocktail table, and really just, it's almost like you're painting with color in this room, which I also need to comment that you basically are an artist of textiles and wall coverings because you have your own line, which speaks to your sort of passion for these.
Yeah, so it's so fun to be able to have that as a creative outlet, outside of the design job too. So it's really fun to be able to do that and work with color and pattern and create all of that from the beginning. It's a really neat thing to do. So it's been a fun education as well.
Can you tell us what the name of your line is?
Yeah, it's House of Harris. So we have fabric and wallpaper, and it's all made here in the US. We've launched 2 collections so far, and they're very, I have it with my sister, Liz Carroll, who's a designer in Wilmington, North Carolina. And she does a lot of coastal casual projects. As you can tell with my work, they're usually full of color and more eclectic. And so it's been a really neat marriage of design and coloration. So we designed the patterns in black and white first, and then we begin to color them. And it's really interesting to see some of my color choices in a combination together and how it might work, and then some of her more muted colorations and how it might work in the same way. And it's so interesting to see them both work successfully in different applications. So it's been really fun to see that.
Right. I love how sort of establishing the contrast up front is how you kind of figure out the impact. And that's interesting to me because you really have a real love of pattern, and you have a way of combining patterns in ways that are just out of this world, in my opinion.
For some reason or another, it comes so naturally to mix colors and patterns and wallpapers and layers in a space. And it comes so much more naturally to me than doing something neutral. And so it even kind of goes back to me personally. When I'm getting dressed in the morning, I could wear, 4 different colors and 3 different patterns and lots of layers, and before I put on like an all black outfit. So for some reason that just, comes naturally to me, and it's so much easier for me to do that. And a lot of times I don't think about how they might work together. It's just instinctive, and it's more of an intuition that it just feels good together. And that's usually what I base it off of, is just kind of a gut reaction of how it feels together. So.
I love that. And, speaking of color, you really use color to sort of shake up a family heirloom in the dining room. You really brought this treasured antique piece into the current day in a really cool way. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, and it was in the dining room. Which piece are we talking about?
Well, I think the dining table was a treasured antique, right?
Oh, yes, it was. We had the dining table that was passed down from their family, and it's a beautiful dining table. And we didn't, we had the wallpaper in the living room across the way, so we wanted this to be a little bit more solid on the walls, I guess. But we didn't want just to choose a white, so we brought out this beautiful green color. The client had existing her dining chairs, the armless chairs, and we added some leaves into this dining table to extend it to fit this larger room. And then we purchased some captain's chairs to go at the head of the table and upholster those in a different color. So we really accentuated the greens in this room and have this beautiful silk kind of chinoiserie Schumacher fabric on the drape.
Yes. And you also really use a very beautiful green in the kitchen, that sort of moss color on the counter stools, which you may want to tell us, it sort of speaks to the green that we see out the windows as well, right?
It does. We wanted to kind of create those natural earth tones that you see straight out the window in that space. And we didn't, the kitchen is it's very muted. We added a lot of elements in there because I didn't want that space to fall flat. So this is kind of going back to how much harder it is to create a neutral space because you don't want it to fall flat. So without the color in the kitchen, we had to rely on finishes. So we used a variety of different materials. We used a stained wood for the island. We used a beautiful marble, white marble, with some warm veining in it for the island countertop, and then actually chose a different countertop for the stove back where the stove is. There's a black countertop back there. We plastered the entire kitchen walls. So I think it comes across a little bit in the magazine, but in person, there's a lot of depth to the walls with the plaster. And the plaster is also very durable. So it provides a wonderful, durable backsplash for the cooktop as well. And we added a lot of, brass accents and materials with the faucet. And we added a brass trim on the hood. And there's some brass accents as well in the light fixture. So it's really, it's really about all that mixing, and just so you don't have this one kind of white flat space.
Right. And I get a little feel of a throwback feel in this kitchen, where you get this sort of industrial vintage with all the metals and LeConte range. And it really is a tribute to this special house and the era it came from. I think it was 1939 when it was built.
I think that's right. Yeah. The homeowners love to cook too. So this also needed to be highly functional. And there were very specific requests that they both had for that. And so, we added the brass racks where all of their copper pots sit out all the time and are used every single day. We actually did, I take that back, we had a little bit of color in this kitchen. The LeConte range is a deep red color. So it's hard, you don't get a good view of it in the magazine, but there is a little pop of color with the range, which is really fun. But yeah, they're very classic elements in this kitchen. So I think the kitchen is the transition centrally located from the old house to the new house. So that was kind of our transition right there. So that's where we wanted to blend some very classic traditional elements with some more modern techniques.
Yes, and the kitchen blends into the family room as well, right?
It does, yes. So the kitchen open to the family room, and it's also open to this beautiful breakfast room that has windows on all three sides, which is just a gorgeous space full of light.
I think you described it as a greenhouse effect, which I thought was so nice.
It does feel a little bit like a greenhouse, and it has a vaulted ceiling, which we added some wood to, and so it's very warm. But it's right in the middle of their garden, and it's just lush and happy and sunny, and it's a beautiful place to eat.
And you and Frank Smith sort of collaborated on the color of the windows to paint them Fairwind balls off black, right?
We did. There were a lot of samples that we went through to find that one, and it was the perfect warm dark tone. The black was too harsh, the browns were too warm, so it was the perfect in between that really fit the bill. So we were really excited about that.
Speaking of the perfect in between, this scullery with the sculpted soapstone and the amazing Jamestown blue cabinetry, I would really like to make a quarantini in this space.
I'm sure many a quarantini had been made in that space in the past 40 days.
So what was your vision here in this room?
Well, we wanted this space to feel intimate and exciting. And it's a small little contained corner off of the kitchen and off of the pantry. And we just wanted it to be fun. We showed the clients a couple different wallpaper options, and they immediately were drawn to this paper. They loved the animals and the little monkeys that were in the wallpaper. So for some reason it resonated with them, and we were thrilled because it just was such a fun paper to use. So similar to the living room, where we pulled out that poppy color of the paper, we pulled out this beautiful blue from this paper, and it really was soothing, and then also had some sophistication against the black countertop. So we loved that combination together, and we actually ended up integrating the countertop into the sink as well. So it all was just one one material, which was kind of neat.
The seamlessness is beautiful. And it's the same soapstone used on the perimeter countertops in the kitchen as well.
Yes, it is.
Continuity. And,
and also helps with the budget sometimes as well.
And speaking of continuity, I mean, you brought the Jamestown blue to the ceiling, and also in the study, there's this amazing Valdez Weaver's leopard print fabric that you chose for the upholstered wall. And then it also shows up, you have to look for it, but it's in these amazing little sconces.
Yes, our favorite Urban Electric sconces. We love the detail of, I specifically love the detail of a custom shade on a sconce. I think it elevates even the most simple sconce into a very custom piece. So we love the idea of that, and it just helped blend in the sconces instead of making them stand out against that beautiful rich wood.
Right, and the rich wood was another element that was rebuilt or restored to its original beauty, right?
Yeah, so we loved this study as it was, and we didn't want to do a thing to it. Once the contractor started getting into the details, once they were looking at the electrical, they realized that there was some damage done to the wood over time and we wouldn't be able to restore it. So we took samples off, had to rebuild all of the molding, and we stained the wood exactly the same color as it was. So we rebuilt this room exactly as it was. It was a shame we couldn't leave it originally, but it's a beautiful, cozy space, and we were so thrilled to be able to do that. And when we did that, we were able to actually kind of create this niche for the sofa there. So that was an added bonus.
Oh, you added that after. That was really smart. I love that touch. And also, I love seeing the honey bunch tables here from another queen, Barry Benson, who you know well, right?
Yes, so I adore Barry, and I worked for her for many years, and she is a wonderful mentor to me, and I love everything she's done for Highland House. So I try to integrate those into projects whenever I can, and it's a very easy thing to integrate because they're so wonderful and they're so customizable. So we've used them so many times in different ways. So the honey bunch tables made an appearance there, and they were the perfect thing for this space because they're so functional in their flexibility. So you can kind of pull them apart and use them as drink tables, and they move all around that room, and they've just been wonderful.
Yes, I love that. And I love the Highland House bed that you chose for the master suite, which is all about glamour and this very appropriate, restrained femininity, I would say.
So this is another space where, to me, it's very neutral. And so it was a struggle to me to make sure we added enough depth, but also kept the serenity that the clients really wanted in this space. What doesn't get photographed in the magazine are the beautiful French doors opposite of the bed. So you're looking out the same view as the family room, where you have those 4 beautiful French doors looking out into the yard. So they have a beautiful green view out their bed. And we wanted that to be the focus. And that's a really peaceful place to be. And so we pulled some beautiful mint greens as accents, but didn't want anything too bold. So that was really the inspiration for the bedroom. And we layered it with a lot of beautiful linens and a lot of, just textures in the fabrics.
Right. And speaking of greens, I love that you're again speaking to Myers Park's famous tree cover. And I also felt like there might have been a little bit of a hint of that vintage, a reference to the vintage in the mint green color. Was that intentional?
I don't know if it was intentional or not. I think it kind of worked out that way. But the green, the mint green was just a subtle, it was almost like a subtle play off of this scene out there, French doors, and like the most serene color I could pull from that.
Got it. Well, speaking of vintage touches, I love what you did for the floors in the master bathroom. It's a sort of classic black and white tile, but you designed this unique pattern for it, right?
We did. I'm not sure that the tile installer loved us as much as everyone loved the pattern. It was almost like a puzzle. And so we wanted this really beautiful black and white pattern on the floor. And it definitely, I think, is a nod to the classic design elements of the time of the house. So we essentially got our black and white penny tiles, and then in AutoCAD made a puzzle to create this pattern, and then laid it out on site and digitally printed it basically, and then they laid it to our specifications and did an amazing job. So it was really neat to see all of that come together, and it was so fun to see it from conception to installation.
And it's so fun to see it in our magazine and to just be able to feature one of your projects. And then this tile paired with that amazing antique mirror, and the way that you mounted another mirror over it is just extraordinary. So I am so thankful that you talked to us about this amazing home, and it was so nice speaking with you today.
Of course, thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kate. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Charlotte.
Bye.